Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that we're all here yet another day. Welcome to the Daily Medicine Transmission for October 19th, 2021. It feels like we're in this kind of weird stasis moment here as we are sandwiched between the Mercury Jupiter stationing direct and our full moon tomorrow, our full moon in Aries. And of course, we do have the moon in Aries today. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I really, truly appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're new to this channel, regardless of what platform you find yourself on, thank you for joining us. It's really great to have you here and to be participating in this journey. So I'm also just like moving locations constantly. And that's, you got to be flexible. You got to be flexible and capable of just rolling with whatever life is presenting to you. And that's not always going to be in your control. But what you do have in your control is how you respond to those things. And boy, I sound like a broken record all the time, but it's just, excuse me, it's something that is important to keep in mind as we are, in these unprecedented times. So I'm actually at my parents' house right now. I need some privacy with my work today. My partner is home from work, and so I do have my home office. But, and I'm watching my parents' house because they are away when my dad is in Pittsburgh at the hospital. So I'm taking care of their house, and so I'm just going to stay here and do the transmission here. So hopefully the lighting looks pretty decent. I hope the sound is okay. They have a landline still. So if the phone rings, there's not much I can do about that in the interim. So I'm just getting myself situated here. So how is everyone doing? I'm going to check in with the stream, make sure everything is going well so far. I hope everyone is doing okay. We do have some solar weather. It seems to be peaking right about now, actually. There is, the coronal hole stream that we're in now, and it's, the speed, the solar wind speed is starting to increase. Just before I came live, I went and checked it again, and it was starting to peak a little bit, and the geomagnetic unrest is starting to heighten a little bit as well. So we'll see if the Schumann makes any kind of response. So far, it's been pretty mellow. There have been little blips in the amplitude in the last couple of days and some shifting in the frequency. But for the most part, it's been pretty calm. It's been pretty calm. But what has not been calm? Well, a lot of things have not been calm, of course. But it does appear that we are in some sort of stasis moment. And of course, since we're about to hit the full moon, which is this culmination point of our lunar cycle that started with this Libra new moon that was really inviting us to set some intention around how do we cultivate, how do we find our still point in the center. It seems kind of appropriate that at this moment we would be kind of getting very still, getting very quiet, even though the moon is in its, pretty much at the very end of its waxing phase and will reach full illumination or full luminosity tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that tomorrow. With tomorrow's transmission. But it does feel like that we're kind of in this moment now of just being with it, right? Just being with it, being still with it, whatever that is for you, right? There's a lot of things that are transpiring in people's lives, their personal lives, what's happening out there in the macro, and just being very still, because the truth is only going to come from the inside, the inner wisdom, the ability to tap into our own innate, into our own gut, into our own intuition. And something that's going to come up in this reading that I will go over again because it's come out in the reading, in the intuitive reading, and the cards specifically, is that it's important to realize this has been a hard pill to swallow. And this is very much where Chiron is coming into play right now. And of course, the moon crossed over Chiron last night. So we'll talk about that too, expand on this. But it appears, and like I said, this has been it's a hard pill to swallow, and I have been really struggling with this and really, and not uncomfortable that I'm struggling with it, like really taking the time to be honest with what's on my heart and really just sit with it, and not be, deterred by how uncomfortable it is, not to push back on it. Those Chiron wounds, well, there's the phone. Those Chiron wounds, certainly make themselves, see, this is important. Oh, they hung up already. These Chiron wounds will come to the surface, and they will be so potent and so powerful, especially in Aries, because we're talking about the essential nature of who we are, the subjective experience of who we are. Yes, I know. Nobody calls on the landline except for, people who are telemarketers or bill collectors. I mean, that's why you have a landline, honestly. Oh, and when that EMP from the solar flare comes and everything is knocked out, even those won't work anymore. So, all right. So that Chiron wound is going to, in the realm of how we identify ourselves, the person we present to the world, our subjective experience of who we are, before it's impacted by anything else around us, by our consciousness, our self-esteem and character, even our creative expression. Aries is such a unique sign because it's the very beginning, right? And often it gets very, put into this category of like being hot-tempered and angry and warrior-like. And yes, those things are certainly associated with Aries, but really we're talking about the very beginning. The very beginning of the cycle, the spring, the beginning of spring, when things are fresh and they're new and they're untainted, right? Kind of like where Neptune is in Pisces right now. The little child petting the lamb. The lamb, oftentimes Aries in astrology, in the zodiac is considered a ram, but it's very much considered the lamb as well. So it's fresh, it's new, it's untainted by any other influences as of yet. It's very much in its innocence and its natural state. That's something to consider as well. And so with the moon moving through Aries right now, and will culminate at the full moon tomorrow, we're all kind of feeling a return to ourselves in some way. So the moon crosses Chiron last night, overnight, late last night or early this morning, crosses Chiron, and old symbols are given new meaning. And this is something that I've been sitting with for a while, because the tendency here with Chiron is to do everything but actually address the initial wounding and the identity specifically that goes along with that wounding. And so a lot of things been heavy on my mind and my heart about these symbols and these representations and these images and what they represent and what they have been representing and how they can be presented to us in a new light, right? With a new frame of reference in order to grow, and to understand ourselves and to understand the duality within us. And this is why there's a couple reasons why today's image is what it is, but the unity beyond polarity is very much an Aries thing, because we encompass within each of us that unity that is beyond polarity. And through the course of our lifetime and our growth and our experiences, we go back into the experience of duality and separation as part of being in this form. But before we even get there, we don't really realize the difference, right? We don't experience the duality between us and the rest of the world, or the separation, until we actually have some consciousness that starts to develop, right? The Gemini sign, the third house, right? That first, expression of consciousness, that first recognition that there is a difference between myself and the environment. And so, however you want to understand that moment, it is the reaching towards the sun, but at the same time, it is almost it's the curse or the fall, right? Of what it means to become self-aware. So we won't get too ahead of ourselves, because that's Gemini. And once the nodes shift, there's not going to be any Gemini for a while, at least not until we get back into the spring and spring into the summer. Then we'll see more Gemini. But in the meantime, we are in a different time of year, are we not? So I've been really there's a lot of things that have been heavy in terms of symbolism, what they mean, what we've been taught, what is truth, right? And it's important to realize that our intuition and even our instinct, right? That instinct or that survival mechanism that initiates fight, flight, or freeze, right? Those are all the aspects of the nervous system and how it responds to danger or stress. Those can be conditioned and they can be impacted by past experiences, especially past experiences that are either traumatic, current experiences that are traumatic, that are triggering. That's where PTSD comes from. And it's important to realize that we actually have the capacity to go into our own field, into our own subconscious experience and make changes there, right? We can't change the past. We can't change exactly what has happened to us that has led to those responses in the first place, showing up as PTSD. But we can have a sense of awareness now, and we can make decisions based on that awareness now. And so the moon in Aries, whereas, there's some flared emotions and tempers and angry emotions, and we're going to see the height of that by tomorrow with the full moon, right? The disappointment and the necessity to take responsibility for our own actions, right? Very Andromedan galaxy. Remember, these are the agents of the social revolutionary front, because the freedom to be oneself in any given moment is the primary signature of the Andromedan starseed. But the duality that exists outside and part of our growth process is part of us on the inside. And when we can start there and start working with that duality from within us and to make sense of it, then this is how you hack your own shadow before you even get into the rest of it, right? And so then as you go forward and you experience life and all the things that come at you, you've already know what the potential is in terms of the duality within you. And so you know how to respond to it outside of you as well. Just like the seed, all of the potential for growth and what we could be is part of our DNA. It's already in the blueprint. And then what we do with it is how that is expressed. So there's genetics and then there's epigenetics. And those two things are intertwined, much like the DNA double helix is intertwined with each other. So in order to do have to understand the necessity on some level of the polarity, but we also have to exist outside of that as well, or to get to the unification part of that in order to actually make the most of it. And it really depends on how we are making the most of it, right? We can identify with the presented problem, reaction, solution that is fed to us, right? Much like you feed code to a program or software in some ways, or even an operating system. That's important to consider. I mean, we're talking about the very baseline of how we interact with reality here. It's down to the operating system, which is, Terence McKenna talked about with his culture, right? Our culture and our cultural understanding, our traditions, based on our society, all function as an operating system. And when you do shamanic practices, especially stuff like plant medicine, you strip that all away. Now, what goes in its place is really what's worth focusing on. Sorry, I'm having a lot of speech issues lately too. Aries is my third house. So I can, oh boy. Aries is my third house. Late Aries is my third house. If we're going to do cusps, late Aries is my third house. So this full moon on that ninth and third house cusp is going to, again, higher mind, understanding, and knowledge. The difference between knowledge and higher understanding. So that's just like an astrology little tidbit, third and ninth house. So I don't have all the answers. I'm just here to interpret the message, interpret the language, and then what that means to you is going to be have to be what you come up with. See, it's coming out in a way that is jumbled and garbled right now, at least in terms of what I should be able to do right now. So I want to show you something real quick, in terms of what's going on out there. Just, again, it's important to just pay attention to what's actually happening rather than what you are being told is happening, because that's a big difference. And we can't control for every outlet of information, right? I mean, there's so much energy that's put into controlling the flow of information for this very reason, but we can do our best. So I want to show you something here. Maybe, perhaps. Here we go. So we're looking at earthquakes for today, and there's certainly a lot. Something about Emily, before we get into this, I just want to say that this house was not the house that I grew up in. The house I grew up in was like a mile or so down the road. And if I had to be there on a regular basis, it would be totally different. There's just way too much there that I'm glad I don't have to interface with on a regular basis. Not that it was the house itself, it was just aspects of my childhood that were very traumatic that are associated with that particular domicile. My parents' house now is super awesome, and I love it, and I like to be here as much as I can because it represents a transition that was really good for everybody, me and the rest of my family. So I don't feel like a kid because I didn't grow up here, but I do feel comfortable in the house that my folks created when they moved into this place. So that's a really awesome reference, actually. Thank you for bringing that up. So what I want to show you here is, there's been a lot of earthquakes, and I've been tracking them, of course, and we know that there's like connection between seismic activity and the quality and the amplitude of the electromagnetic field around the planet. There's definitely a correlation there, but I want to show you something in particular. This is let's make sure this is, yes, exactly. This is a fairly recent earthquake as well. And look where we find ourselves, back in Greece. Okay, so 5.9, that's pretty big. And there's a lot of seismic activity that's hovering around that 4 to 5 to 6 range all over the world. But this is what I want to show you. So we've had a lot of earthquakes on Crete. Here's the island of Crete right here. And they've gotten rocked pretty hard. A lot of this 2 months, right? That's a big deal for this area. But and so there was a big one in the water, right? So I just want to zoom out just a little bit. I just want you to look. Just pay attention to where things are, right? What area we're looking at here, right? In the Mediterranean Sea. What are we looking at? Well, here is, Egypt, we're looking at Israel, we're looking at Syria, we're looking at Turkey, we're looking at, this whole area here, the Gaza Strip, right? Jerusalem, this is important. I'm not going to necessarily expand on this. I just want you to pay attention to how much seismic activity has been happening in this area right here, and what is around it. Like, what's going on over here? Maybe there's no connection. I don't know. I'm just curious if anybody has any, if you have it in Beirut. Remember, there was that huge explosion last year, that massive explosion in Beirut last year. And so the last 2 months, there have been sizable earthquakes here and then over here. Now I want to show you one more thing. I just want to open this up just a little bit. So here we are. There's Pompeii right here on the west coast of Italy, right here, like around Naples-ish. There's a huge underwater volcano here in this area, massive underwater volcano. And then you see that there's major seismic activity right here in the Mediterranean. And there is most likely some other activity as well. Now, just this whole area, what's going on over here? Syria, Israel, Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, Egypt. There's what's around there? I don't know. I know. I'm just putting it out there. Benghazi, look at that. That's a pretty well-known and very notable place at this point when we talk about the political sphere. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you, and then we'll move on to the other stuff here. So, where am I? So the Canary Islands, right over here, this is where La Palma is. La Palma, that continues to flow lava. There continues to be seismic activity in relation to La Palma, the volcano. And they continue to have to evacuate and to move people because it just keeps erupting and keeps shaking. And so there's always the possibility that if there is a large enough earthquake associated with La Palma, the east coast of the US and the Caribbean gets a tsunami. So just, pay attention here to what's going on. All right. So that's just the one thing I wanted to share for today in terms of that. So let's get into the reading, because we're going to see here that, where am I at? There's me. Hi, guys. Discernment. I literally have just been questioning everything at this point, like every single thing. And like I said, with Chiron where it is, we're really going to be put to that test in terms of looking at old images of who, especially who we are, our subjective experience, what things mean to us personally, what is the essence of our individual and subjective experience, being, triggering a lot of identity issues, a lot of victim mentality, or conversely, the savior complex when it comes to our subjective experience, who we are, how we identify ourselves, and a sense of belonging in this world as just an identity, as just an individual that contains all of the desire and potency to grow in accordance to natural law. So when things are presented to us now, especially when the moon crossed over this point, as we'll see in the astrology for today, it's brought right to the surface, and having a very distinct emotional connection to those images, those traditional images, and how they can be thought of in a wider scope with a whole new symbolism. And that's, again, with Chiron involved, it's very painful. We will do anything to get around that issue. We will bypass it every means possible in order to not have to identify, that part of ourselves and let it go, because who are we without the identity of a wounded healer, right? Like, you're born with it. And everybody's got Chiron in the chart. So you identify those areas in your life that represent that original wounding, and then where it's transiting in your chart is going to tell you time and space in terms of how this is currently impacting you. But we do need to really sit with some things. That's what it feels like. Really, really sit with them, especially now that Jupiter is direct and Mercury is now direct, and they're both getting, they're both accelerating, they're getting their forward momentum back after they had been in their retrograde. And so they haven't quite turned on. Everybody seems to have a different idea of what Mercury retrograde turning direct has felt like. Some people have reported that it felt like a flip of a switch and everything's back to normal. I certainly did not necessarily necessarily feel that way. Although I did feel some normality, but again, it just felt like that things were going to start coming into reality, right? The birthing process was turning back on, and maybe that is normal for you. And if it is, then you're very comfortable with that situation. Personally, I have Mercury retrograde in my natal chart. And so the introspective, the internalized focused is something that I'm much more calibrated with. So when Mercury stations direct, it just, it's not that it's unfamiliar to me. It's just that I already have the calibration for that inner realm. And that's just how my mind works. Like, it's way more active on the inside than it ever is on the outside. Now you can understand why, there's a lot of misarticulation and jumbling of words in a lot of cases when it comes to that third house stuff, because things are moving more quickly than I'm able to actually get them out. But in my mind, it's perfect all the time, all the time. So here we go. So our causal factor here is actually quite balanced. And you're going to see here that there are two cards that represent this very same thing in this reading. You have the Six of Discs, success, material success. And we also have the Six of Keys down here as well. Same exact card with the same basic meaning, because they're both involved with the moon in Taurus, right? Which is exalted. We are going to have the moon in Taurus, after the full moon tomorrow. So in some ways, we might be finding ourselves like pre-waving, what this second half of our lunar cycle may represent, but also too, just to kind of get into the relative framework of what to expect. But even if you're feeling this today, which it does feel like in some ways that there is a measure of success, and now it's time to really get deeper into what has been at the root of things to begin with, right? So Six of Discs, right? The success. So we know that the six is that, harmonious reconciliation of opposites, right? It's that harmonious aspect after a very, bottoming out in terms of the discs or the pentacles. We're talking about the Five of Discs, right? The worry, the material crisis. So this comes out of that very much more mature, very much more realistic about the value of things, not overvaluing them, but also not undervaluing them or taking them for granted. There is a considerable amount of recognition of like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand, and you have a wiser attitude towards all kinds of material concerns because you've been kind of through the material crisis, right? So resources, your job or your house, anything that has to do with your resources and the nuts and bolts of your physical life and material life. So if it's something that you gather resources from, if it's something that is a resource to you that you interact with, like I said, your home or your house, all of your material possessions, your currency, your resources, and of course, your actual energetic resources, because that's where it starts, of course. So nothing is taken for granted so easily anymore. And there are many things that we can point to, I'm sure. I mean, I can, rattle off a number of them right now just in my own life and other people close to me, where you realize material wealth is measured in actual value, not what we are putting on it necessarily. So there's an overcoming of a material crisis that has put us out on the other side being much wiser, much more mature, and way more comfortable in the medium of our growth and what it actually means to us and what the actual value is. It's really easy to take things for granted when you don't have to think about them. But now that they're in your face all the time, whatever that is, you actually do have to consider those things. So this is saying, this is the coming into the moment that we've experienced some measure of coming out of the crisis materially and realizing actual value, like learning something. And now there's all directions to go when it comes to material, the material realm. It's harmonization and a reconciliation. and a balance in a lot of ways, but it came from reconciling not only the opposites, but reconciling the bottom, right? The five, the bottoming out of, and in this case, the worry or the material crisis itself. So this is a good thing to start with, because in some ways, when we're talking about the moon in Taurus, it's exalted as we move to our high priestess at the heart here. I mean, this is the moon. There she is right here, the moon, holding the sun, right? There's a lot of occult symbolism here. So let's pick this apart just a little bit, okay? Remember, we talked about this. Nobody owns these archetypes. These are the archetypes of the human experience, what they are used for, how they are interpreted, how they are projected out to the world and what they mean. That is what matters. But these experiences and the creation of these archetypes, I mean, this is coming from Carl Jung, for instance, that these are, in fact, hardwired. They're part of the human experience no matter what. Now, talk about questioning everything. When you start to really unpack, like, who, people like Carl Jung, people like Joseph Campbell, what was their goal? What societies did they belong to? Who were they part of? Were they part of the occult secret societies? I mean, this is the level of, like, it'll drive you insane if you really, this is like the rabbit hole that you can never come out of if you're not careful. So again, just keep that in mind as we are addressing some of these things, that they are not, they may be universal, but their meaning, there it is. There's the Chiron. The meaning is not in itself necessarily universal, because it's people who have put those meanings on these symbols or archetypes throughout the ages, throughout time. And so their reason for it, their motivation for it, their belief systems are also going to come into play here. And of course, we're looking at Crowley's deck. So, and he wasn't the artist. He had his own artist for for his deck, the Thoth deck. But again, you have to keep in mind who was the person or people or the value system that was putting forward the definitions. It can be maddening in a lot of ways. But when we look at the very basis of what this represents, the high priestess, right? It is the moon. It is our intuition. It is the deepest wisdom. It is the space within us, the void within us. You can see that there is a veil that covers it, but you can see right through it. It's a mesh, right? And so it's a very thin veil, but it still exists. And it is about our inner wisdom, our subconscious, the darkness, the mystery, the psychic power, inner wisdom at its deepest, right? And it's a desire to find our inner source, it's our intuitive knowledge, and it represents the patience as well that is necessary, and the quiet, right? And the stillness that is necessary in order to glean wisdom from the subconscious, not from the conscious mind, but what's going on at the deepest part of who we are. In the astrological connection to the high priestess, it's number 2, by the way. The magician is number 1. The high priestess is number 2. So it's very much rooted in this alchemical process right from the beginning. Gemini and Cancer, right? Gemini and Cancer, Mercury, and the high priestess is the moon. So it's the moon in Scorpio in the 12th house, right? The darkest, mysterious power. And it represents a lot about desire, right? The moon is a drive, just like our feelings and our emotions will drive us, right? They will drive us to act. They will drive us to certain conclusions based on our feelings. And this is, getting down into the root of things. And this is where you go when you go into hypnosis, for instance, or go into yoga nidra, for instance. And this is where you go when you sleep, right? This is going into those zones as well. So at the heart here, right? At the heart, we have this success, right? With the 6 of discs, the success in a material way where we've gained some sort of wisdom about material success and what it really means and the value of it, and allowing our emotions to really settle into the actual value and be comfortable for just a moment, right? And comfortable and successful enough to be able to expand out in all directions. Now we find ourselves like really getting into the inner source of knowledge and wisdom and the patience that's necessary. There is an incredible amount of stillness that is required in order to really get into this place and be aware of the wisdom from the subconscious. In some ways, we don't have to necessarily worry so much as we come from a place that allows a certain amount of material success, quote unquote, because the moon is embedded in the soil. It's embedded in the medium. It doesn't have to go anywhere. There's a certain amount of security and wisdom that goes along with where we're coming from. And now we get to go into the moon part and not so much the discs or the pentacles or the physical material nature of it. We can go just deeply into the intuition and the intuitive knowledge. This is the heart of this reading right here. Now, we've seen this one before, and I know I've been feeling this, and I think a lot of other people are feeling it too. The will, wisdom, and mind, again, being reversed. And this is not the first time we've seen it in this position, in its reversal. So, diminished authority, loss of position. You feel like something is missing, or that you're not getting in touch with your guides or your talents or your wisdom. You feel like you're spinning your wheels. And part of that is overthinking things, going around the same issues over and over with no clarity, right? You're just kind of going over the same thing over and over, right? The monkey mind just keeps going and going, and you're not getting anywhere. And in fact, you're actually losing energy as a result of it. Now, it does let us know that no matter what, we're going to stand, even if it's difficult, but we may feel diminished. We may feel a loss of power. And it's important that we get out of our heads, because this is where the problem is, and connect to what? Our inner wisdom. But this is where we are rooted right now, collectively, like loss of position. Authority may be diminished. We feel like we're spinning our wheels. What's going to happen? We have no clarity. I know I feel this way. I'm just like, okay, and this is, again, this goes right back to where the moon is and where Chiron is. And this is also an incredible position to be taken advantage of when you're here, right? Somebody offers you answers, even when you think they're coming from you, right? That's important. When you think that you're getting offered answers, or somebody's offering you some measure of support, or stepping into your life as a support system. And I'm not suggesting that in itself is negative, but you have to be, if you're coming from a place where you at the heart are deeply invested in this inner wisdom and getting into the subconscious realm and going silent and still, but where you're drawing your power from is the diminished authority, loss of position, you feel like something's missing. When we get to here, I really don't want to put this thought out there necessarily, but what I'm saying is that this person, this is a well-balanced masculine. We have to be very discerning about this, right? And maybe we have to, and maybe what it is that the authority that the lack of authority that we feel like we're drawing our power from, because we're just like, the crown is toppled off and we're like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand what is going on. And I feel like that this is way more connected to what's going to be the case after the full moon. Once the full moon hits and we go into the second half of this lunar cycle, I do feel like that we are going to be really embarking on this energy, because somebody's going to have a crown toppling, and it's really going to motivate a lot of what's coming from the subconscious because of this full moon. We can really, we have our attention, and we can really release our energy in some ways into embodying this type of identity, right? The King of Roses is a very thoughtful and tender, well-balanced masculine, right? There's distinctly a masculine royal quality here. You can see it. He's got a very basic throne, okay, that's out in the garden, but he's not sitting on the throne. He's like in contemplation. He's holding all of these roses that represent different, you can see that it's a couple different ones that represent different aspects of who he is, and it's balanced. It also represents somebody that is stepping into the role of a father or a husband or any type of balanced masculine energy that is balanced with its feminine. Distinctly masculine. So there's a sense of standing up for yourself, taking loving action on your own behalf, right? And standing in your authority and power, but it's coming from a place of love and compassion and thoughtfulness, right? Thoughtfulness. And so we may be drawing our power from a place where we feel completely like our crown is knocked off, but at the very least, we can focus our attention right now. And with this very deep search for wisdom at the heart of it, we can embody this or look for something that represents this or, allow this energy to come into our experience or, into our attention in some way. But it does, we have to be discerning because the other aspect of it, and this is why the priestess at the heart here really does allow, if we get deeply into what truth is and our own inner wisdom and how it reflects that truth, because the tendency here, we could easily get pulled into a relationship or into a person who looks like this in our attention, right? In our outer attention and our awareness, but is not necessarily going to, too good to be true. That's something that is worth considering. But that's not the vibe that I'm necessarily getting, although that could be. It's really speaking to me right now, and I'm curious to see how other people feel about it. It's really speaking to me is that we want to, we may feel on some very deep level that our authority has been diminished on, in terms of our own power. But if we at least choose to focus our awareness into this and embody this identity, right? So we're still in that royal position. There's still a sense of masculinity. And of course, we have the moon in Aries right now. So, and Aries does represent, in the tarot, the emperor, right? There's a sense of, subjective actualization and a thrusting forward, but this is a sense of masculine authority that is very thoughtful and interested in the inner experience and interested in the intuitive experience, the emotional experience, how he feels and what he's going to do about that. So that's where we can put our attention. Because we're going to need it in order to really be discerning about what our karmic role actually is meant to be for each of us. Now, what to expect? Here's our truce, right? That Four of Swords or the respite. We're really going to give ourselves an opportunity to find some sort of solving of a problem, finding a solution, complete some sort of mental process. And as the sun is finishing its transit of Libra, we're going to reach that mastery level of every sign at 30 degrees, which is true understanding, a true philosopher that truly understands both sides of the equation and is able to reach some sort of stability in especially with the sun, in our expression of who we are finding this balance. And I do feel like that the King of Roses, again, can really represent like the sun at this point where we can come to know ourselves and to step into that role of ourselves completely as true understanding of polarity, because once you do that, you can bring it together and then you operate beyond the polarity. You find the duality and the return to source and to love that is beyond the duality. And that's the pinnacle here, the culmination of the Libra sign, the zodiac sign of Libra, when the sun will be there. And then we go into Scorpio season. But before that happens, this truce, right? Use it as a moment, right, of reflection and consideration. Some idea will be coming full circle, and it's going to come from, what's interesting is if we don't get the crown knocked out, like if we don't feel that diminishment of authority, what impetus do we actually have to search for a deeper, more meaningful wisdom within ourselves? We don't. And so in some ways, it actually will, I feel like, motivate us to really bring these aspects together and some idea, some concept coming full circle. And I would say at the end of Libra, and this card does represent the last decan or the last 10 degrees of Libra, some idea will come full circle. Like we will come to recognition of it and use this moment of respite and balance to really reconsider something and reflect. There's that Chiron in Aries again, right? Because Aries is the opposite of all this Libra energy. So, and we'll get into the astrology in a minute. I want to finish here. So 6 of Keys, which is our guidance point for our crown being knocked off, authority being diminished, where we really, really tapping into that feeling of our will, wisdom, and mind being turned on its head. Again, the 6 of Keys, 6 of Discs, 6 of Keys, the in crescent moon, the waxing moon. We are at full waxing capacity right now as we are about to embark on full luminosity of our moon. And so again, this is, there's a lot to be said for what we've done so far. There's an increase in abundance and growth. Just remember that. And we may have to get more subtle about what that is, right? Because here's the mouse. It says you're overlooking some important details. So pay closer attention to what's going on. Maybe closer attention to what's going on based on what we have, what has increased so far. Where is our abundance? What has grown over time? Now, something about the mouse too that's really important is to sit back and observe, right? Check out nonverbal communication with people, body language, for instance. If you're really trying to figure out if someone's authentic or legitimate or worthy of your attention in terms of information or whatever they're providing, body language says a lot. Sit back and observe, right? Use your empath skills, use your intuitive skills. That's what the moon is for. Not what it's for, but I mean, there would be no life on this planet without the moon. Having that impact on all of the water on the planet, especially the oceans. But take the time to understand every agreement. Take the time to be cautious and scrutinize and be sensitive to the subtle messages. Be sure you've covered everything before you move forward. Again, at the heart of the matter is the stillness of the priestess, the high priestess, the stillness and the darkness and the void that allows us to get into the space of our subconscious. And this is where we really pick up on the subtle messages and the body language and the things we may have missed. And so while we may be drawing power from and really rooted in a place where our authority feels diminished, in fact, there has been so much that's happened already. There has been growth and abundance that we have been working on since the beginning of this lunar cycle and beyond, of course, but definitely this lunar cycle. And so just be sure you've covered everything, like really, really get into the subtlety of things. And especially if you're struggling with things and their imagery and you're starting to get whispers of like, that's not right. Something about that's off or whatever, right? Whatever it is for each of us. Be sure you have covered everything before embarking. And the mouse survives by being very in tune to subtlety all around. Like you never see them really because they will move at any indication that there is something happening, right? And so this is the message of the mouse, is to really get into the observational, really tap into the very subtle changes and dynamics as well. Now, when it gets to where we're putting our conscious attention and energy, well, here's our trust your instincts to discern the truth of the situation. The shark is a throwback to like old life forms, right? There's no It's cold-blooded. It's old. The shark is a predator, right? It is total instinct. And in terms of us and where we're putting our attention and the people that we are giving our attention to, who is in our conscious sphere of awareness, take the time again to tune into your gut feeling, right? Actual instinct, right? So instinct, and so there's fight, flight, and freeze, right? In terms of how your nervous system is going to function in response to stress. Now there's actual stress like danger. Danger is very real, right? Danger is very real, and we are built in order to have an internalized system that lets us know when there's danger. And many people have experienced this in their own lives, to stay away from danger by picking up on subtle or not so subtle things that come out, that say, here, go do this, or a voice in your head that's like, here, stay away from that, or whatever, or just a feeling. So and it goes both ways, right? Trust the signals, but also remember that trust for instinctual signals can be modified. It can be distorted by what conditioning. We are all subjected to so much conditioning. It will melt your brain if you really go into the fact that everything you know has been a conditioning experience by those who have a specific agenda to condition you, to put you in a certain category and trajectory. So keep that in mind too. Many of us have learned or are unaware of the fact that our intuition we think is accurate, and it's been conditioned over time, over and over and over and over and over again. And this is a hard lesson to learn. It's a painful lesson to learn. And I'm just grateful that I learned it before now, so that I can not be so attached to what I thought was something when it starts to crumble, or there are other aspects that come in that are leading me to acknowledge that what I thought was my intuition was really a conditioned response. And that can be right in our DNA, right? That can be something that's not even from us, right? And that's a studied reaction. That's verifiable by research with lab mice, right? That they were conditioned, lab mice were conditioned to be afraid or to have a certain physiological response when exposed to certain stimuli, right? So the scent of something would be followed immediately by an electroshock. And the offspring of those particular mice, they didn't even need the electric shock when they were exposed to that stimulation, which was the scent of something like cherry blossoms, I think. Their offspring would have the same fear conditioned response. So keep that in mind as well. It's conditioning not just us in our own subconscious, but even deeper. Very much deeper into our Akash, into our DNA. Like the DNA holds actual memory, and so this is why there seems to be genetic types of diseases that get passed down, because it's literal. It's literally coded into the DNA. But just as much as it's coded, we can purge that code, and frequency and vibration is the way to do it. DNA is a blueprint of information and responds to frequency and vibration, because light is frequency and vibration, and light is information. So something to keep in mind as well. But the shark is letting us know how important. I mean, there's two animals here that are talking about getting into the subtlety, trusting our instincts, taking the time to tune into our gut, fine tuning it, making sure that it's not modified or distorted by conditioning that was outside of the realm of our control. We have to be aware of that, because we are coming to a very important relationship. And this is what ultimately we're looking at with, look at that, a number 7. Interesting. So there's a lot more balance here, right? You have 6s and 2s and 4s in this. Even will, wisdom, and mind is 2, 0, 20. So there's a lot more of those even number kind of balanced energies today, except for this one, right? The fated meeting, letting us know that we are coming to a very important relationship, either with a person, with ourselves, from karma from our past that's brought it together. Something is coming forward that we, and fate, remember, fate is nothing more than a cause and effect relationship, of course. So it's not something that's set up for us outside of our control. It's a result of our own actions, but possibly actions that have to do with something outside of this particular lifetime, for instance. But karma from the past is bringing us together with this important relationship, regardless of who and what it is with. So we have to be mindful to keep our individual and collective growth a priority in the face of this fated meeting, this coming to a very important relationship. And we have to be aware of what it is. And we're only going to be aware of it by tuning into the subtle aspects, by being able to be cautious and to scrutinize, but also be very sensitive and trust our gut and make sure that our instinctual signals haven't been modified or distorted by conditioning, and be willing to let images that have represented certain things, allow them to evolve or change, or allow yourself to evolve and change in the face of those images. That's really what's happening. Is that as we grow and as we evolve and we change and we mature, those symbols will start taking on a new meaning. And we put so much emphasis on what those symbols have meant based on most likely what we've been conditioned to accept, that letting them go is a huge trigger. So, but if we can't get into the more subtle realms and understand how this may have happened in the first place, and really just take some considered and loving action towards ourself and our own, growth, we're going to miss the fated meeting, right? Whatever it is, coming to and maybe that's just what it is. Maybe the fated meeting is the result of coming to terms with this flipping of who we are. And this is where we get past the polarity, right? Because if we're still stuck in the divisiveness of the polarity, even within ourselves, because we're talking about Aries and we're talking about the moon in Aries, if we don't allow, we just get pulled into the other side of it, right? And then we don't actually utilize the potency for growth for what it actually is meant to be. So, it's intense. You really have to take the time to really reconsider some things and reconsider ourselves. So let's get into the astrology, shall we? Shall we? Let's see what's going on here. I want to check in with the chat real quick. Translating super amazing thoughts into verbal words. That makes sense. Seemingly easy tasks, they've been challenging. Now I know. Thank you, Mr. Miyagi. Oh my God. Have you ever seen, speaking of Mr. Miyagi, I don't know if anybody's ever seen first of all, Cobra Kai, which speaking of flipping the script, this is amazing actually. Flipping the script. If you've watched it's on YouTube, Cobra Kai, it completely flips the script from the original Karate Kid. And one thing that is definitively missing from Cobra Kai is Mr. Miyagi. He's already passed away, so he's not there. Hi there, this is Daisy. He's already passed away, so he's not an influence on anybody there, which I think is actually really important to consider. But if you flip the script, and Emily, you just blew my mind just bringing up that, because it's the perfect analogy for all of this. If you flip the script and look at it, that whole story from a different perspective, you will see how much Daniel-san was actually the bully, and inserting himself in situations that were none of his freaking business, and using his karate skills from Mr. Miyagi to control situations that he wanted. So, again, flipping of the script, it can be really if we're so attached to, Daniel's the hero, like I can't see it that way because of Chiron, then you're not going to actually give yourself the opportunity to synthesize and create anything new or come to unity, which, the whole thing of Cobra Kai is showing that Johnny was really the struggling victim and was betrayed at every turn by the people he trusted the most, right? I don't know. Just watch it if you haven't seen Cobra Kai, because it exemplifies what I'm talking about so perfectly. So let's look at the astrology for today, now that we've made our connection to Mr. Miyagi. It really is. I mean, you just have to, and there's plenty of YouTube videos out there that will actually walk you through it in like 6 minutes about, if you look at it through the lens of the other side of things, which is really what we're being asked to do, to look at things from the other side of the lens, so that we understand exactly what's happening. Because without that understanding, how are you actually going to transcend it? Speaking of transcendence, this is where the sun is today, actually. We're looking here at our chart for today, and we've seen now that the moon is already past Chiron. It's already past its trine with Venus, which we'll talk about. And currently, Venus is on her way to being in a quincunx with Uranus. And this all fits together very well. So first, we're going to talk about the sun at 26 to 27 degrees Libra, right? This being able to transcend all of our personal and earthly material matters. It's not that we are bypassing it. It's when you get to this point in Libra, you have the transcendent viewpoint that allows you to see, again, both sides of the scale, so that you can get the full picture and not be directly connected to it. Now, this does seem in some ways a little counterintuitive to what the reading is suggesting, only in that we are being really drawn into the emotional, feeling-based experience of all of this, whereas the sun is our expressive, outward identity, right? Our ego consciousness in its most creative form is what the sun represents. And so, and we're going to feel this dichotomy, I think, in the most obvious way with the full moon, with Libra and the moon in Aries as well. So but that's coming tomorrow. So leading up to that, in this moment here, the sun is saying, having us, we really find ourselves like expressing who we are by being able to transcend, sailing high in the sky like an airplane, right? How everything looks so small and almost, it looks so small and unimpactful when you're flying 30,000 feet in the air, for instance, right? You see the whole picture, and it has a completely different definition. It has a totally different meaning when you're looking at things from that perspective. So this is where the sun is. Mercury is still at the same degree that it's stationed retrograde or direct at. So it's still in this position now where our thoughts are again. And this goes back to the issue of being able to express oneself appropriately, because especially in this degree of Libra, the bottleneck that exists from moving from the acquisition of the knowledge to applying the knowledge from a verbal, cognitive, empirical, communicative respect. I mean, Mercury's still getting used to that, right? It's like trying to teach after you've spent, all of this time accumulating, right? Just again, your mind, it's perfect in your mind, but once it starts spilling out, it's a totally different experience. So I feel like that Mercury stationing direct has actually, personally, I feel like that it's been, a kind of a slow startup, and it really made its point, not, on the very last hours of the retrograde before it actually stationed into its stasis point. It was just like going, everything that could go wrong was going wrong technically and digitally. So anything that has to do with a signal of information was just like, nope. Ow. Sorry. This kitten, this is Daisy. She thinks I'm her climbing post right now. So I've been having, that's another realm of struggle in that way. So Venus, here we go. Let's actually go back a little bit so we can talk about Venus and the moon at the same time. So we'll go back and we'll show when, which is most likely why we were all sleeping, or late last night when the moon met Chiron. So that became pretty obvious to us in some way, shape, or form that the new images or the traditional images that have new symbolism based on a teacher, something coming forward within us that is based on our own innate knowing, our own wisdom, our own subconscious, something coming forward from the subconscious that is providing new imagery, new symbolism to old images, old traditional images, old symbols, coming forward with new imagery from our subconscious, which can be really scary, which we will ignore in a lot of ways, which we will bypass in all kinds of ways, or we'll just be very uncomfortable with it. All of those things are okay. But I think the important thing is to just sit with it and be open to the subtlety of all of these things so that you can fine-tune your own discernment. So this is what was happening early this morning, late last night. And then the moon comes into a trine with our good friend Venus at the degree we talked about yesterday. Remember, retribution, the widow's past being brought to light, right? The widow's past being brought to light, the fact that the karma from an old cycle will cloud and darken the new one if it's been unresolved. And so there's this idea of retribution that comes forward in this trine, this Aries moon trine. And I want to share with you the Sabian symbol because I wrote down the wrong one. So let's make sure it's the right one. Yes. This is 13 degrees, right? Because we round up. It's an unexploded bomb at an unexploded bomb reveals an unsuccessful social protest, an immature evaluation of the possibility of transforming suddenly the status quo. Remember, we talked about how things cannot just happen, just because we want them to, and we have all the potency and desire within us, right? It's like the seed going, I want to be the full-grown plant, and I want it now. And, that's not happening. In some ways, it has us bursting forward immaturely, as the Sabian symbol represents. So there's an adolescent frustration. So also too, then in that trine to Venus, we feel it right in our bodies, in our relationships, in what is valuable to us, right? What's valuable to us? Our resources, our health, our relationships, our projects, our home, our comfort, our security, right? All of those things, symmetry, balance, all of those things are very Venusian. What is the object of our desire? And desire is an Aries trait. So the object of our desire is what we identify outside of us that is driving us, that is having us move outward and forward and giving us momentum to go and bring back to us. That is what Venus ultimately represents. And what she does is attracted to her. So this trine in this moment, right? First thing this morning, very early this morning on the West Coast, moving into the morning, we're feeling it. We're feeling that frustration. We're feeling that frustration, and it's in reference to a very real, very palpable, very material connection to karma of a past situation coming forward. I've seen it in injuries, people's health issues. It really depends on where Venus is. This Venus transiting Sag in your chart. I mean, for me, it's in my 10th house. Boy, oh boy. And second house. So we're talking about resources, karmic, DNA, ancestral karma coming through that is in the second house, the objects, the material world that I identify as mine to have. What are my resources? In a trine to Venus that's in my house of career and destiny. And what has not been, I'm not going to share with you exactly because it's personal for me about what my process is. That's for me and my work, but, it's coming up and it's uncomfortable and we want to fix it and we want to change it right away and because it's uncomfortable, right? Venus doesn't like being uncomfortable and she's very uncomfortable in this situation. So this moment was an incredible moment of just awareness and having it come up to the surface and just sitting with it and being like, oh, we can't move on until we acknowledge this, whatever it is. it's very interesting. And so that reared its head already today, first thing this morning. So, I'm curious to see how that's impacting people. And Uranus is going to be a big part of this too, because Venus then comes into that quincunx with Uranus. But in the meantime, as the moon is making her transit, she also, one thing that before that even happened, sorry guys, oh my gosh, we missed a huge one, is an opposition to Mercury, right? Here's our opposition to Mercury right here. And so, even before we get to that frustration of wanting to actualize something that in this material, third dimensional physical dimension will grow over time, even though we want it to happen now, and that's part of the frustration. Even before we get to that point, we find ourselves, at least on some level, trying to centralize our own subjective power through our ego. And again, right, encapsulating it, bringing it in, being like, okay, the center of me and my ego is going to be the one that rules everything, and it's a manifestation of needing some order, right? Especially when we hit Chiron at that point and we're just like, I'm really uncomfortable with what's coming up, and it's really triggering me in a sense of wounding, and I'm not comfortable with these things meaning something different because I've banked my entire identity on these things. Man, it's so uncomfortable. And so the opposition to Mercury in this moment, as we are attempting in this moment to bring it all together, to centralize our ego, to get some measure of control, and the integrative principle is limited to the more or less like I am realization. Whereas in Mercury, it's like, okay, how do I take that and communicate it out? How do I take all of this and communicate it out? Whereas the moon is like, nope, this is us, right? This drive and this urge and the feeling is to be like, I just want to bring it all in. I want to be a seed, covered in a shell at this point. And so there's a personal ego exertion, right? Because this is what Aries really represents. And the ego is nothing more than like the inner child that's just trying to keep us safe, right? And trying to, is the lamb, right? It's innocent, it's fresh, it's brand new, it's not mitigated or mediated or conditioned in any way at this point. It's just raw and holds all of the potential. So there's this personal ego exerting its will to control what otherwise is just emotions coming out. Whereas Mercury is like, okay, how do I actually apply everything I've learned about myself out into social context? This is, again, this opposition, finding the fulcrum, right? Finding the fulcrum, because we don't want to let go of ourselves entirely, because it's important that we're actually embracing this Aries aspect of who we are. As uncomfortable as this all is, it's important that we're embracing it, but we also don't want to get so embracing of it that that we're protecting, the inner child is taking over, and we're not allowing ourselves to at least communicate what we're experiencing, because what we're experiencing in the communication of it actually is going to assist in the social context. This cat, oh my God. Meow. I know. You miss them so much. They've been gone for almost 3 weeks. I know. Okay. So this was last night as well. So again, a lot of activity in the dream state. I'll tell you what, it was definitely, I don't know how anybody else's sleep was, but mine was very disrupted. It was a lot of very intense dreaming and just disruptive and not very restful. Okay. And I'm sure that there's other things like solar weather and stuff like that that's impacting it. But I know that a lot of it has been this moon phase through Aries and what connections it's making. So we talked about that. We talked about Venus. And then we go on to, let's see here. Oh, I know. Yes. Okay. Okay. We're going to talk about Mercury is in a quincunx to Pallas Athena again, right? Because now it's moving direct. So it's coming back over that point. Remember, we talked about this last week. The path is narrow, right? And this is the strategy that we are being provided if we choose to accept it within ourself, in our own wisdom, right? Pallas Athena is the goddess of wisdom and strategy, right? So a strategy that's being offered that we can integrate into ourselves. It's a very narrow path. And part of the reconsideration of old images into new symbolic representations can really help in the process of allowing ourselves to narrow our focus, right? The eye of the needle is the only way, right? We can't, and things drop away as we get more and more narrow. And part of that, the quincunx with Mercury is that there is Pisces is mutable water. It's malleable, it's shiftable, it's got no form, right? It can change form so easily. Whereas Libra is cardinal air. It's got momentum, it's got direction. It is meant to be applied, right? We're applying our knowledge in a communicative way, in an expressive way. Our nervous system is actually outputting as much as it's inputting right now in terms of this large body of knowledge about ourselves and how to find peace of mind, and now trying to output it somehow, communicate it somehow, express it somehow. Whereas Pallas Athena, right, the quincunx, how do we adjust ourselves in this moment? How do we transmute what is a very specific and very malleable, in a lot of ways, there's not a lot of room, so we can shift and change around to get into the eye of the needle, right? We can shape shift, literally, right? Because it's not about we can't make the eye of the needle any bigger. We can't make the path any wider than it's meant to be. But we can shift our shape in as a strategy in order to do so. But that does not allow us to, allow the communication, the forward momentum of expression and information, a large body of information. We can't hold a large body of information while we're trying to get through this narrow pathway of towards awakening and enlightenment, whatever that means anymore. Such an overused term. Geez. Anyway, so we go through there's a need to adjust ourselves in this moment, because we can't necessarily do both until we figure out a way to transmute it. And I do feel like that the transmutation comes from the unity above the polarity. And we'll get there. This is going to be the capstone of today's transmission. And Venus and this is part of it too, Venus comes into a quincunx today with Uranus, as you can see here, with Uranus. And so this is going to be about, later today. Look at that, right on, it's this evening, late afternoon, early evening, into the evening. We're going to find an exact quincunx between Venus. Now, she's shifted degrees, and 14 degrees of Sagittarius is the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. And it represents very specifically a social or collective paradigm that is deeper than what we acknowledge as our current civilization, right? So we've talked about this many times, that Edgar Cayce, I'm sure among other intuitives and channelers and readers, right? That's what he did. He was a reader, and he would go into trance. He said that the Akashic records are under the Sphinx, and whether or not that's literal or not, it doesn't really matter. It's the idea that there is something way deeper and more ancient than what we are currently led to believe in terms of our history, in terms of civilized human history, actual organized civilized human history. And so Venus is now getting into the point where she we're having a very distinct connection here to where we've come from, something much deeper than what we have been told where we came from. Again, there's that conditioning of our responses, and the conditioning of the symbols and the imagery that has brought out something that we didn't even realize we were participating in, right? And so Venus, in her attempts to find security and comfort in the collective paradigm, there's a much deeper search here. And the thing that is, again, adjustment that needs to be made in this moment is that Uranus, as the agent of our radical reorientation and psychological crisis at a collective level, again, is doing so at a material level that almost is forcing us into, again, almost the eye of the needle in some ways, where the only real pathway to the awakening and the psychological crisis comes from the revitalization from the physical world, from the material world, from the unconscious patterns, right? Being able to return to a more natural state, being able to return to our subconscious and our unconscious instinct, intuition, our innate, and to be revitalized by that. And not so much about what our higher mind is necessarily doing. And there is, like I said, Venus wants to be comfortable. Venus is what attracts the object of her desire. And so she will go on the search and search for meaning that is deeper than what we are presented with already. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing this. The adjustment comes that, again, the individuation that's forced from Uranus, right? That shifts everything onto its side in order to gain a completely different perspective in the realm of our material realm, which is the realm of Venus, by the way. It's more about going into the more innate, to feel into our bodies, into our intuition, into the natural world, and be revitalized with that. So how do we adjust ourselves with these two things that don't seem to fit? Well, we don't want to completely give ourselves over to this deep search necessarily. It might be a rabbit hole we can never come out of, right? And that also depends on whose collective paradigm you're operating under as well. That's something to really consider, because Sagittarius is about the societal belief system, religion and dogma and philosophy and the law, right? The letter of the law. These are the result of our cohesion with each other in a social framework, as opposed to the natural law, the natural world. So that's something to consider in this adjustment, that both of these things will be experienced, and how we make them fit together when they don't fit together is part of our transmutational process. And here, let's talk, this is going to be the capstone for today, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going to come tomorrow. So Juno, asteroid Juno, or Hera, the wife of Zeus. Do you ever wonder why she doesn't get there's no planet named after her? Like, she's not part of the original pantheon that's expressed by all of these planets. In fact, Venus is the only specifically female deity that's part of the, and the moon, I mean, she's not a deity, but you know what I mean. The lunar aspect is distinctly feminine. And for as much as Saturn does get father of time, lord of time, Saturn is considered male in ancient mythology and astrology and all of those types of systems. Capricorn is distinctly a feminine sign. So it is the machinery of nature that really has no gender, honestly, but is feminine in the sense that it is the earth, right? It is the unfoldment rather than any type of action-oriented, which is distinctly the masculine pole. So anyway, Juno, asteroid Juno, is the representation of keeping the scales balanced by any means necessary. And so what happens is, this is not coming from a state of total awareness of the whole big picture. This is coming from a tit for tat type of thing, right? Because Jupiter or Zeus would step out constantly, and Juno or Hera would respond by doing some really messed up things. So betrayal and the things that motivate us to get revenge, or find balance, or balance the scales no matter what, and staying in that commitment no matter what. That's what Juno really represents. I'm not trying to give her a bad name. It's just that there's a tendency here. And the fact that she is in Sagittarius, a little bit ahead of Venus, at conjunction with fixed star Ras Al Hague. And Ras Al Hague is the head of the serpent, right? It is the head of the serpent bearer, Asclepius or a ficus. Now there's a story that goes along with this, Asclepius or a ficus, right? The healer that uses the serpent medicine, herbal remedies, is able to heal infections, heal from poisons. And Asclepius had to be taken out of commission because he actually figured out how to raise the dead. There's someone else. There's someone else in religious tradition that was able to heal the sick and raise the dead. Oh, that's very fascinating. And I think that people would be very shocked if they started going into deep Gnosticism and learning the connections between that particular figure and the serpent mystery schools. Anyway, so had to be taken out because he figured out, Asclepius or Ophiuchus figured out. But there's another myth that goes along with this constellation of serpents and holding of the snakes. And it's that when Hercules was born, so Hercules was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman. And this, I just learned this actually not that long ago, this extra bit. So Hera was, pissed as usual because he violated their contract, their covenant, because they're married. And so in an effort to balance that out, in a very, materially based way, you could call that revenge. She put two serpents in the crib of Hercules, right? And, because Hercules was half immortal, he totally wrangled them, right? And then, so what happens is Hercules, that doesn't work. And so she has him banished to the woods or something, into the wilderness. And another goddess, Minerva, picks him up, takes him back, finds this orphan, takes him back to Juno or Hera and says, I found this orphan in the woods. And so Hera, she ends up nursing Hercules, not even realizing it's Hercules. And then, because she's nursing him from her immortal teat and the milk that comes from her as a goddess, she, invariably makes him even stronger, right? So it's like this idea that when we try to suppress those aspects, and they come back around and we end up making them stronger anyway. And this is exactly what I want to talk about with this serpent medicine type of reference, because Juno is at the star Ras Al Hague, and Ras Al Hague is the head of the serpent bearer. So it does suggest that there is some measure of higher mind and knowledge and intelligence that is involved with wrangling the serpent, controlling the serpent, right? Controlling the kundalini for the sake of healing, right? And specifically that, healing. And when we are able to do so, this is where we are able to really, come into our real power, right? We have to actually be able to handle this. And so the duality of the serpent, you can think of as the DNA, right? The twisting, the double helix of the DNA, the serpent that's wrapped around the caduceus of healing in, the concept of modern medicine, for instance, or on Mercury. Mercury is also related to the caduceus, right? Because there's something about our focus and our nervous system, right? Our nervous system is an electrical system, and Tantra specifically is related to the nervous system. Kundalini is related to the chi in the blood, but Tantra is the stimulation of the nervous system to a higher pitch, a higher vibration through physical and sensual stimulation. And if you've ever practiced actual Tantra, you'll know that it's not really just about like sex. That is the higher level. But at the very base level, it's more about doing it's about stimulating the nervous system. Anyway, there's something along with that too for the healing aspect. These two things together, the kundalini, the chi in the blood, plus the regulation of all of it in the nervous system at a higher vibration. We have to be able to wrangle the serpent. We have to be able to control the serpent. We have to be able to hold the serpent. And when we do that, then we actually do find unity beyond the polarity. It's when we don't do this, or we utilize the serpent for personal gain, that is when we find ourselves in one side or the other of the polarity. And this is not mastery at all. It's mastery at a lower 4D level, but it's mastery to meet our own desires, meet our own accumulation of wealth and resources, our own desire to control and manipulate or to be in charge, right? So this is how the serpent medicine and how the serpent has gotten such a bad rap. I mean, it's controlled from every angle so that we don't realize that human beings are innately powerful for healing, right? For self-healing and for, to, remain immortal, right? Because it comes from the DNA, and the DNA is carrying memory into the next incarnation, into our offspring, all of these things. So when the moon comes into that sextile, right, we see that we have all the optimism, cosmic optimism, all of the potential for what we could create in cooperation together, in communion together, that is embedded within each of us. We each hold this key within each of us. In this sextile to Juno at the head of the serpent bearer, that even there will be forces that will in fact try to squash this. They will try to mitigate it as much as possible because they can't get out of the duality. That was the problem with their situation. They were so stuck together that they couldn't get out of their own duality. So they kept going back and forth with revenge as a result of betrayal, and it'll squash us, right? But within us, if we can identify within us the potency and the desire to actually work in communion and cooperation and what we can actually do, and it's embedded within each of us, boy, we can really, really reconcile that. But it's not going to come without some very deep work right now, and a willingness to get very, very still and to come to some sort of reflection and reconsideration of everything we considered was reality, or considered our truth, because there's only one truth. Truth is truth is truth. Everything else is perception. And symbols will change. Our perception of them is going to change. And we have to be willing to go into the discomfort and go into those deeper areas of ourselves to see how we have been conditioned with certain symbolic references and representations, and decide, are they representations of truth? And is that what we want to continue giving our energy to? It's not going to be easy. And, we're all dealing with it on certain levels. So with that being said, I did post the flyer for, oh, hi, Sonia. I haven't seen you on a live in a while. And I am glad that I'm talking about this too. I appreciate there's the phone ringing again. So of course, this is an important thing to be paying attention to. So I posted the flyer for the offering that I have, the sale that I have. How does it end? $99, and we look at your astrological chart from the full moon that happens tomorrow all the way to the end of 2021. That's $99, and I accept through PayPal and Venmo, so that's something that you can get on the schedule. Even if we don't do the reading this week, we'll still focus on how the full moon has impacted you and look at the ticking time clock of your own evolution and growth. So that's up. You can always go to the website and check out all of the services that I have to offer, and you can book a reading or energy work session through there as well. I am working with people's pets. I haven't updated my website to reflect that yet, but I am working with people's animals and their pets, and also other people. It doesn't have to be just you. I can work with other people in your life that need energy healing Reiki is easy to give people without their, I don't want to say without their consent, but because Reiki is the highest order of, it is divine energy. And so it'll go exactly where it needs to go. And it's very similar to praying for someone. So I'm very comfortable offering that work to other people. If you're interested in getting Reiki treatment for other people in your life, you have a parent, you have a family member, you have a spouse, you have a friend, you have a child, you have an animal in your life that really could use some energetic support, that's always an option. Now, readings, on the other hand, I need people's consent and permission before I will do a reading, an energetic reading on them. So that's a different story. But yeah, reach out. My email's in the description box. My website's in the description box. You can find Catalyst Energies on social media through Telegram and Facebook at this point. So you can keep I've posted a lot of other videos and playlists recently of just stuff that I find inspiring and really helpful. So you can find that through social media as well. Thank you so much for sticking with this transmission today. I love you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. If you want to support this work, you can go to Subscribestar. That's also linked in the description box below, and support me there for these transmissions so I can keep offering them on a daily basis, and also offering more subscriber-oriented types of services, offerings, right? Some weekly check-ins, moving the weekly astrology to subscribers, that kind of stuff. So, and also let me know what works for you. What do you feel would be really valuable for your subscription? I'm open to suggestions as well. So you guys have a great day. I hope that you are doing the best that you can with what's coming up that may be uncomfortable, and expressing some measure of change. Be open to change, and be open to change. Let's just put it that way. Be open to change, and be open to the idea that somebody else may have imprinted symbolism that you are operating under that has been taking you off of your trajectory for a long time, or is putting your energy into somebody else's overall goal. That's something to consider as well. And we think we're doing good work. And I don't mean to be disparaging to people who are doing well for themselves and still helping other people. But we have to think ahead of just beyond ourselves. We have to be able to think ahead to multiple generations. We have to think ahead to how is this actually influencing the longevity of humanity on this planet? That's something to really consider. And deeply looking within, honing your intuition, sharpening your discernment, and being willing to reconsider and reflect some things that maybe you've taken for granted. And hopefully you don't take for granted anymore. So with that, I'm going to leave you. Thanks guys for being here. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. And we will be together tomorrow for the full moon in Aries. Take care, guys.